Hey everybody! Today we're going to take a look at the basics of modeling in Blender. We'll go a little deeper than we did in the first video, and we'll discuss perspective and orthographic modes, basic geometry transformations, and modifiers. We'll talk more about organizing your objects in your scene as well. And we're going to make a cool little mushroom house along the way to help solidify these skills. Let's fire up Blender and open a new general file. We'll start by deleting our default cube. Now, let's talk a little bit more about perspective and orthographic views. You can switch back and forth between these modes by using 5 on the numpad. If that's not working for you, check your numlock. You can tell which mode you're in here in the upper left-hand corner. Perspective mode represents how the human eye sees the world. Closer objects appear larger, and those that are further away seem smaller. Parallel lines appear to merge together in the distance. This mode is great for scene composition and rendering and checking that your objects appear realistic from varying viewpoints. Orthographic mode, on the other hand, removes all depth perception so that objects appear the same size regardless of distance. This mode is useful for modeling, aligning objects, and ensuring precise measurements. Now let's switch to front orthographic view by hitting 1 on the numpad. We'll bring up our Add menu by hitting Shift-A on our keyboard. And we'll select Image, Reference Image, and bring in our front view image. Now let's adjust the opacity of our image so that we can see through it. Let's scale it up and move it to the world origin. We're going to name this image Front in our outliner. And let's go ahead and create a new collection here by right-clicking and selecting New. Let's name that Reference Images and place Front inside of it. Now let's go to our right-hand view by pressing 3 on our numpad. We'll import the left side of our model, which will face the right-hand side. We'll rename this image to left, and it should go ahead and create this image inside of our collection. But if it doesn't, just drag that inside our reference images collection. Now we can adjust the opacity of this image as well. Let's go ahead and keep that from being visible by clicking the eye in the outliner. We can also disable rendering this collection since it is only for building our model. Now we're going to go to the other side by hitting Control and 3, and it'll import the image for the other side. Let's also adjust this image's opacity. This image will be named Right and saved in our collection as well. I'd like to take a minute and discuss the usefulness of reference images. Reference images are a really good idea to use because they give you a clear visual guide, which will help improve your speed and accuracy. Even if you don't import them and follow them precisely, it's good to collect some visual references to look at while you model. Sometimes you will miss some details if you're relying on your memory. There are a number of sites where you can create a board of inspirational images, and some artists also use these to collect color palettes or lighting effects they want to use in their projects. I use a free Canva account, and I know some people use Pinterest, and I know there are others. You can comment below if you have a site that you particularly like. Here is one of my Canva inspo boards for a project I'm currently working on. I would be remiss not to mention copyright law at this time. There are a number of reference images on the web that are subject to copyright. What that means is that you can model them for your own practice and enjoyment, but you can't use the copyrighted images in any case where you might make money from it. You can create your own images in a number of ways, however. You can take photos of your intended subject or as close as you have available. Be sure to take front, side, and top pictures if you can. The quality of these pictures will translate directly to your end product. If you can draw, you can create your own model images, or you can edit someone else's images to change them enough that they become your own. You want to ensure that they are merely derivative rather than a direct or very close copy. I have made the images we will use for our mushroom house available in a public GitHub repo, which I will link in the description below. This will be a pretty simplified model, but my main goal is to show you many of the useful tools that are available in Blender. You will be able to use this knowledge going forward, and I encourage you to try out additional models on your own to cement these concepts. You can really model anything. If I look around my desk, for example, I have a coffee cup, a clock, some speakers, and a microphone. Any one of these things would be great practice, and every new model you create will present its own unique challenges, which will end up being a valuable learning experience as you work your way through them. Now we're going to add a cylinder. You'll see that right after we add it and before we do other operations on our cylinder. We have this properties box that we can expand. We want to ensure that we have triangle fans for our cylinder end caps. We also have the option to make the top a single face or end-on, or to have no end cap, which will leave you with a tube shape. But for our purposes, the triangle fan is the best option, and you'll see what we'll do with that soon. We can change the vertices, radius, and depth, as well as adjust the location and rotation, but we'll leave these on their default. Now let's hit G to grab and then Z to move our cylinder along the Z-axis, and then 1 to move it up exactly 1 unit, so that the base of our mushroom is sitting on the world origin. Let's go ahead and rename this cylinder to Mushroom House, and make sure it was not created in the reference images folder. If it was, go ahead and move it out now. Then let's hit our Tab key to go into Edit mode. We'll move into X-ray mode with this button in the upper right of our viewport and ensure that we are on Vertex Select mode here. You can also use the keyboard number 1 to enter Vertex Select. Let's add a couple of windows on the right side of our viewport to give us multiple views of our mesh. We'll stack these 2 windows here on the side. We'll leave the top one in perspective, then go to front view in our large window with numpad 1, and set this last one to right side view by using numpad 3. The important shortcuts to know as we start modeling our mesh are G for grab, R for rotate, and S to scale. Additionally, we can restrict any one of these actions to one axis by pressing the X, Y, or Z keys to indicate which axis this operation should use. For example, if we want to scale it on just 2 axes, we will hit Shift and the shortcut key for the axis we want to exclude. For example, if we want to scale our object horizontally, but don't want to make it taller, we can hit S followed by Shift C, and we can see here that that works. Now let's select our top row of vertices. Let's extrude these for the stem by pressing the E button. It should default to extruding on the Z-axis, and you can tell it's locked to the Z-axis by this blue line here. Also, if it's not, this will be fairly obvious, like here where you can see that it fails to go straight upward. If you don't see that blue line and your vertices aren't going straight up, go ahead and hit the Z button and you should see the blue line now show up. We're going to extrude this to the top of the stem in our reference image. To create the cap of the mushroom, we're going to first extrude the top of our mesh with the E key and immediately click to lock our vertices in place. They will still be selected, so we don't want to click anywhere else in our scene. Instead, let's use the S key to scale them out to form the base of our cap. Then we can extrude and scale with E and S repeatedly until we reach the top of our cap, shaking the ring of vertices to match as we go. Now, let's select the rings around the mushroom cap. First, let's go into Edge Select mode, either up here in the left-hand corner or with the 2 key. We'll use Alt and click to select a ring of vertices, then hold down Shift and Alt while selecting the others with our left mouse button. Next, while this selection is still active, we are going to use Control B to bevel these rings. This will give us a smoother cap on our mushroom. We can increase the segments in our bevel by using the box here at the bottom of our screen. Let's set our segments to 3. Next, we're going to add loop cuts with Control R to the stem of our mushroom. And we want to place these at the top of the door and window location, as well as at the bottom of our window. We can add more loop cuts as well to shape our stem as needed. Now we want to look at the bottom of our mushroom cap. First, let's select our inner circle of the cap and use G followed by Z to move it slightly up on the Z axis. Let's go into Face Select mode, either with the button on the top left or by pressing 3 on our keyboard. Now let's select this ring of faces using Alt plus left click. Then we want to inset each of these faces, and we can click I twice to inset them individually. Inset can either inset all faces as a group or inset the faces individually. Then you can toggle between the two by pressing I again. In this case, we want to inset them individually. We just want a very small border around each of these sections. These will form the gills of the mushroom, or a close approximation thereof. While we still have our inset faces selected, let's extrude them on the Z-axis and then scale them down with S. Now we're going to create our door and window. Let's use numpad 1 to return to front orthographic mode. Let's extrude in the space for the door on the Y-axis. Since we are in X-ray mode, we also selected faces on the back side of our mesh. Let's use C for circle selection, and then Shift to remove them. Then right-click to exit circle selection mode. Now we can extrude our door. We can see that our door is still curved, so let's hit S, Y, 0 to scale all the vertices to the same point on the Y-axis. This gives us a flat doorway with a bit of a stoop. We could get really fancy with our door, and you can still choose to do that on your own, but for now, we're just going to make some simple windows and add a doorknob. We'll add a loop cut here so we can make 4 separate window panes. Now we'll select the area for one window and inset it a bit. Then we'll select the remaining section for each window and hit Shift R to repeat the inset. Shift R will repeat the last action performed, and this will give us uniformly sized windows. Let's select them all and extrude them back a bit on the Y-axis to create some depth. Now we're going to add an icosphere. We want to bump the subdivisions up to 3 to make it more round, and then scale the entire object down to be about the size of a doorknob in relation to our door. This is a quick and dirty example, but for our purposes, it will work. Now we're going to bring it forward on the Y, up on the Z, and over on the X. We can then adjust it until it looks right. If we were going to get fancy, we would shape this doorknob a little more and add a backplate and a keyhole. This will be good enough for this model though. Now let's make a window. We're going to use the same basic steps that we used for the window in the door. Let's first select the area where we want our window to be. We can extrude that on the X and then scale the vertices so that they're flat with S, X, 0. We need to rotate our window on the Z-axis a little since it's not quite center. Now we're going to grab the faces of our first plane and inset those faces using I. Let's grab the next area and use Shift-R to repeat. We'll continue this for the third and fourth planes. Now we're going to grab all of our faces and extrude them slightly inward. Let's add a subdivision surface modifier to smooth our model out and give it a more rounded appearance. We click Add Modifier, type in a few letters of subdivision, and then click Enter. Now let's increase our levels to 3 for both the viewport and the render. The higher the level, the more smoothness will be applied to the mesh. If we need to keep some of our edges sharp, we can add loop cuts or a bevel to add some extra geometry. Let's take a little side quest here and talk about some of the other handy modifiers. Modifiers are incredibly powerful tools that allow you to alter your mesh non-destructively. What I mean by that is that the changes made by the modifiers can be undone without affecting the underlying mesh, at least until they're applied. These modifiers can also be stacked, so you can use several modifiers on a single object. Let's tab back into object mode and hide this project for a minute by using the H key. Let's go to front orthographic mode and then add Blender's monkey-headed Suzanne. We'll go back into edit mode and ensure we have X-ray mode on. Now let's be sure we are in vertex select mode, using either one on our keyboard or the button here in the upper left of our viewport window. We'll select the left half of her face, keeping the middle vertices intact, and then delete it by pressing X and then choosing vertices. Now let's add a mirror modifier. We can either find it in the menu here, we can click this search, or we can just start typing. And now we can see that the left half of her face is now visible again. Let's go back to object mode and remove the X-ray from our viewport shading. Let's add the Y-axis selection and see how that looks. We have effectively given Suzanne two faces now, one in the front and one in the back. If we add the Z-axis as well, this starts to look really crazy. We can choose any or all of our axes. Let's go back to just the X-axis mirror. What will happen if we edit now? Let's tab back into edit mode and see. Let's turn on proportional editing and select a vertex at the top of her ear. Let's bring that up on the Z-axis to create a pointed ear. We can dial the area of proportional edit up and down with our middle mouse scroll wheel to change how much of our mesh is edited. You can see that this affects both sides of the mesh. You might notice the bisect and flip options here. These are useful if you have a mesh that crosses the center line and you only want to duplicate half of it. Let's look at a quick example of that. We'll go ahead and apply our mirror modifier to create a full Suzanne head. We need to switch to object mode in order to apply a modifier. Now let's go back into edit mode and modify the left side to have a more normal ear. Let's scale the eye up on this side as well. We'll select the single vertex center of the eye and then increase our selection using Ctrl+. Now let's scale that, still in proportional edit mode, so that the vertices around it also scale. We can now add our mirror modifier again. We can see if we bisect it on the X, we now have two pointed ears. Now let's flip it on the X as well. This flips which side of your mesh is being mirrored. So we now have two normal ears and two buggy eyes. Let's add an empty and see how setting a mirror object can affect our mesh. Basically, this will control the position and rotation used for the mirror plane. We can see as we move it around how this affects our mesh. We can also rotate this. If you want to animate this effect, you could always keyframe your empty. We'll talk more about that in the upcoming animation tutorial. For the sake of brevity, we are not going to go into the other options here. I am planning to do a deeper dive into modifiers as a separate video. Let's take a look now at a couple of others. Now, we like our monkey head so much, we're going to make multiples of her. So let's add an array modifier. We can see that we can update the count and the offset to adjust where our copies are placed. We can also stack array modifiers if we want to create a grid of monkey heads or otherwise duplicate it on more than one axis. There are additional options for this modifier that we will leave for a later discussion. I'm going to introduce one more modifier here that has some useful applications. This is the Boolean modifier. Let's add a cylinder in object mode and scale it down and then scale it up on the z-axis. Let's rotate it on the x-axis by 90 degrees. And then move it until it's placed near the top of Suzanne's head. We'll also set this object to have wireframe visibility. Now let's add our modifier and set our object. We also have the option here to use a collection. Let's see what each of the Boolean options gives us. The intersect option gives us the part of the mesh where the two objects overlap. And it would be helpful here if we actually set our cylinder, so I'll do that now. So you can see that the only mesh that is visible is where both the monkey and the cylinder existed. Our cylinder is still in wireframe here, so the smaller cylinder you see is actually our monkey head modified. Also, our original mesh is now the only one visible and all of our copies have disappeared. We can rectify this by moving the modifier up in the modifiers window. We can click the upper right-hand corner and drag it here. Now we can see the operation reflected in all of our copies as well. Let's look at the union option. For this option, the target object is added to the original object, but any interior faces are removed. The difference option will remove vertices from the original object that appear in the target object. This creates a cylinder-shaped hole through our mesh. Let's grab our cylinder again and scale it. We can see that the hole scales with it. Very cool. There is also an add-on called Bool Tools available that will help you quickly set up Boolean modifiers. Just one more note here about modifiers. If you want to disable a modifier but not remove it from your object, you can disable it for either the viewport or for rendering, or both, by disabling the screen and/or the camera here. If you need to apply a modifier, you must be in object mode, and then you can use this drop-down and select Apply. Also, To delete a modifier, click the X here next to the drop-down. Let's go ahead and get rid of our monkey and cylinder. And then we can make our mushroom house visible again by using Alt-H. Now that our mushroom house is looking good, let's add the chimney. We'll go back into object mode and add a cube. Let's rename our cube to chimney. Now let's go back to edit mode and move it to the appropriate space we see in our reference. Let's scale it on both the X and Y axes using SX and then SY. Now let's extrude it up on the Z until we are inside the mushroom cap. Then we'll extrude once more and scale it down, and then we'll extrude it again up through the top of the mushroom cap. Now let's extrude by hitting E and then right-click to leave it in place. Then we'll scale it up with S until it forms a lip for the top of our chimney. We can extrude it up on the Z-axis again with E followed by Z. Now let's perform the same in-place extrude with E followed by right-click. Then we can scale that inward with S and extrude it down into the chimney space with E. Now we're going to add some very basic materials. Let's go back to object mode so that we can select the house. Now we'll go back into edit mode so that we can assign different colors to different parts of the house. We'll select material preview for our viewport shading. Let's start out with the base color for the model, and then we'll be able to select the parts of the model that are not tan to assign the other colors. We're going to start by opening a shader editor window on the right-hand side. Now let's add a new color and name it tan, and choose a light orange-yellow. Let's add a bright red color for the mushroom cap. We can add a slot to our current object, and then select New to make this a new color. We can name our color red and give it some shininess by turning down the roughness a little. You can preview your color by going to the Material tab of the Properties editor and expanding the Preview section. Now we'll select the top of the cap so that we can assign this color. We'll start by selecting the top vertex of the cap and then hitting Ctrl+ until the desired area is selected. Once we have that, we can hit Assign in the Materials tab to assign this color. Let's select our door and our window and create and assign a brown color. Again, let's create a new slot and color, choose an orange-red, and then turn down the value a bit. We'll name this color brown. Then we can click Assign. For the window panes, instead of making them transparent, since we don't have anything modeled on the inside, we're going to just make them a light blue reflective material. Here we will want to create our color, name it light blue, and then turn down the roughness all the way. Then we can assign that color to our window panes. Next, we are going to assign a bronze color to the doorknob. To select this icosphere, hover over it, then press L to select the entire icosphere. This will select all directly linked vertices. When you use L, if you have anything already selected, it will remain selected in addition to the newly selected linked vertices. Let's add a yellow-orange color and then turn up the metallic all the way. We'll name this color bronze and then assign it to our doorknob. Now we're going to add a brick material for our chimney. Let's go back into object mode and select our chimney. Then we can come into the shader editor and create a new material and name it brick. We're going to add a brick texture using Shift A and plug that into the color on the principal BSDF. Now we're going to add a texture coordinate and plug the UV map into the vector for the brick texture. We can see that this doesn't quite look right on our chimney yet. That is because we need to unwrap our mesh in order for it to map correctly. We're going to come back into edit mode and select all with A. Then we will click U for the unwrap menu. We're going to choose Smart UV Project to fix this. Now we can adjust the scale of the brick texture to our desired effect. One other thing we can do with the brick texture is adjust the colors of the bricks and the mortar. Feel free to use whatever colors you like. I'm going to stick with grays for mine. Now we're going to add a simple background so we can render an image of our mushroom house. Let's make sure we are in object mode and then add a mesh plane and rename it to background. We'll go into edit mode and scale this up a bit. Then we'll scale it a bit further on the x-axis. Let's use 2 on our keyboard to enter edge select mode. Then we'll grab the back edge and extrude it up on the z-axis with E. Now we're going to grab the corner edge at the back here and then use Ctrl B to bevel it. Let's increase these segments to about 8. Whatever looks best to give this a smooth look instead of a harsh corner. Now let's add a material. We're going to use a nice dark green color, or really whatever color you like. Let's go ahead and create a couple of collections in our outliner to organize our objects. We'll create a mushroom house collection by right-clicking and selecting New. Then we'll double-click the name of the collection and call it Mushroom House. Let's drag our house and chimney into this collection. Now we'll add a scene setup collection. Let's add our background and camera to it. Next, we're going to add some lighting to our scene. First, let's delete the default light with X, then confirm. Now we're going to use an HDRI to light our scene. What is HDRI? I'm glad you asked. It stands for High Dynamic Range Imaging, and it's a 360-degree panoramic image with a wide range of brightness levels to light a 3D scene. So what this does for you, in a nutshell, is provide some realistic lighting and reflections from the objects in your scene. This lighting is super easy to set up and saves you a ton of time. So first, we're going to go to our web browser of choice and then navigate to hdrihaven.com. I'll put that link in the description below. This is completely free and you don't have to sign up or sign in to access these great resources. We can see a number of HDRIs on the homepage of HDRI Haven. We can also search. So let's search for forest, because where else would a mushroom house live? And let's grab the one called Dirt Soil by Stream. We click on that and we can see that we can download various resolutions here. I usually use 8 and that should work fine for this. Now let's download and then we'll see how to load it into our scene. We'll come into our shader editor and up at the top by the editor selector, we have a drop-down that lists object, world, and line style. Let's click on world and then we're going to use Shift A to add an environment texture. We can then click on the Open button and navigate to our downloaded HDRI. We can then plug it into the color of our background node, and we can adjust the strength here. We're going to take the strength down a bit because we're going to add another light to our scene. We want to illuminate our mushroom house. Ensuring that we are in object mode, let's use Shift A and select Light Area. We'll make sure this light is in our scene setup collection. Now let's move our area light so that it's in front of and above our mushroom house. And then we can rotate it to shine on our house. We can also scale this light using the S button. Now let's look at our object data for the light. You'll notice that you can change the type of light. These types are also available when you create a light, but if you change your mind about the type you need, you can change that here. We can also change the color of the light. Let's make ours a nice warm yellow-orange color. Then we're going to adjust the strength. We're actually going to adjust this to 2000. Now we're going to find an angle of the scene that we find appealing. Then we are going to use Control-Alt-0 to move our camera to that view. You'll see that while the angle is correct, you may have to adjust the zoom. To do that, we're going to open our sidebar by pressing N. Then we'll go to the View tab and click Camera to View. Then we're going to adjust the zoom with our middle mouse scroll wheel. When we have it adjusted to our liking, we'll click the Camera to View off so we can navigate around our scene without bringing the camera with us. Now we're going to use the Render menu at the top and select Render Image. If we want to, we can use the Image menu to save a copy of our render. That's all for this tutorial. I hope you all have enjoyed building this mushroom house with me, and I hope you have found this tutorial useful. We've discussed a lot of different modeling techniques, and the best way to get used to them and their shortcuts is just by practice. Leave any comments or questions you have, and let me know what Blender projects you are working on or have planned. I'm happy to tailor some upcoming content if there is demand. Don't forget to like and subscribe. The next video I'm planning is a deeper dive into materials and textures, and how we can unlock some of Blender's magic to make our models look even better. I'll see you there, and I wish you all a very happy blendering.